We also don't really have these kind of core sources of truth for data in most enterprises, like, where is the contract for that one customer stored? It might be in 5 different places. That's 5 different chances for the agent to get the wrong one. That is heavy, heavy human work. There's no way to automate it. You have to have people go in, understand the workflow, understand the data, build out evals. I think we need to not be waiting around for the one agent to rule them all.
Wir sind super excited. Wir haben wieder etwas Besonderes für euch, nämlich einen der Top-Gäste aus dem Silicon Valley bei AI to the DNA. Wir sind hier im Remote-Setup, denn diese Folge war nicht möglich vor Ort aufzuzeichnen, aber wir sind hier in der Nacht. Das heißt, wir haben für euch wirklich, was ist es jetzt, 2 Uhr, ich würde sagen Serious Night, diese Folge aufgenommen. Es geht um Aaron Levie, den Co-Founder und heute CEO von Box. Die haben 2005 Box gegründet, eine der longest-serving Companies im Valley, er als quasi CEO. Und Aaron ist einer der Stimmen, wenn es um KI und vor allem das Thema Agents geht und die Frage, wie müssen die Daten dahinter organisiert sein? Und zwar ganz konkret, eure ganzen Excel-Dateien, eure PowerPoints, die Word-Dateien, die E-Mails. Puh, was machen wir damit? So, und insofern gibt es hier eine super intensive Folge High Speed Get Ready mit Aaron Levie bei AI to the DNA. Hier wird's richtig nerdig. Viel Spaß. So Aaron, nice to meet you in almost person finally. And it's been a while that I followed you from the early days of being a founder, and I'm looking really forward to our conversation. And I actually have a question that I'm thinking of for a long time. So organizing company knowledge in order to make it workable for agents seems to me as the key question if I compare it to the industrial revolution when you had a steam engine changing to electrical engine and people were playing around with it but not really realizing how much you can reorganize and how much you have to reorganize. And I know you have a pretty strong opinion on that, and I would like to start right with that.
Yeah, I mean, I think I think this actually cuts to one of the core questions of our kind of agentic era that we're entering, which is how do you get the agents to participate in the workflows that you're doing, and how do you get them access to the knowledge that they need to be effective in any business process you throw them into? And if you just kind of keep doing things the way that you've always been doing, and you just kind of drop in agents into your existing processes, oftentimes you're not going to get the upside that you would expect because there's just a bunch of kind of challenges inherent in agents. Like they're very forgetful. They have to be reprompted with exactly the right context to be effective. They need access to a whole bunch of resources in your organization to be useful. They need to have very, very kind of well-documented sort of understanding of your process. So these are a bunch of things that people don't have to have. People, you can kind of throw them into a new problem and very quickly they can kind of intuit the behaviors of other people in the organization. What's the style of work that we do? They can relatively easily find what they're looking for by asking a colleague or kind of spending a bit of time kind of navigating the corporate systems. Agents don't have a lot of those benefits. They're just gonna kind of go try and find what they're looking for instantaneously, come back maybe with the wrong thing and run with that. And so then the big question is, how do we get agents the most important kind of data and knowledge that they need to be able to be effective? And so I think knowledge management and information management in the 24th century will become one of the kind of core raw ingredients of this industrial revolution that we're entering.
Who do you think gets it right at the moment? I'm thinking of the first ChatGPT moment, and Microsoft came out with Copilot right afterwards and saying, "Oh, we got your SharePoint, we know what we're doing," and then they were trying like, "Okay, guys, this is not how it works." Who would you say 3 years into the ChatGPT game?
Yeah,
who got that?
Well, there's sort of different kind of parts of the ecosystem. I think there's sort of companies that are trying to deliver on that vision as closely as possible. So for instance, what we're working on at Box is make it really easy and secure to get your the right knowledge in your company to agents, again, in a very kind of secure and well-governed way. So we've been working on a bunch of technology to really kind of help with this problem. Then on the other side, there's this sort of, let's say, the practitioners or the users of the tools. And I would actually say, like, generally, you can go and look at small startups to sort of see what are the new practices that those startups are running with or using to be able to go and work in this kind of more agentic or AI forward way. And what they're doing is these small startups are kind of running their businesses entirely differently from how we would have run a company 5 or 10 years ago. So first of all, they're sort of running the business with agents as first-class citizens in their company, which means that they're documenting everything. They are making sure that all of their decisions, all of their corporate knowledge is built out in such a way that agents can on day one have access to that information. They're constructing their workflows in a way that agents can natively participate in them, as opposed to them feeling like they're sort of an afterthought or add-on to the workflow after it's already been kind of designed for people. They're sort of incorporating the right ways that humans now need to be participating in processes, where they have to review the work that the agent is doing, where the agent has to be kind of effectively, making sure that you're again, like looking through all of the output that the agent produced and then incorporating it into the rest of the workflow. So they're designing their workflows in a sort of an AI first way. So most of the lessons are coming from small startups that are kind of operating in this way. And then the big question is, how do big companies end up, how do big companies end up operating like these startups are, given how much change management is required, how much scale these companies have? That's a much harder problem than I think a lot are anticipating. But I think everybody's kind of collectively on this journey together to go and do that.
I can pretty much remember the day when you were a scale up of like 70 million revenue. Now you're 1.2, 1.3 billion in revenue. So you're a huge company. And as I know you from the outside, I would assume you play around on the weekend, you test stuff, you sit there at night, and you go into these things. But the scale is much different. And how would you start in transferring, and what did you do in playing around making Box an AI native company? Or did you shy away and say, like, we will never become an AI native company? There are other companies out there. What's that state at the moment?
Yeah, no. I'm betting everything on us being AI native, and so that means that every process in our company has to be positioned for being AI first as an organization. So everything about how we run our company, how we operate, has to be delivered in an AI first way. That takes on different characteristics. So in engineering, it's relatively straightforward because we are all kind of collectively learning the best practices, where you're going to have maybe Cursor or Claude Code or Codex, and every engineer is going to be deploying agents. And then some of your agents will be local and some of them will be in the cloud. And you need a kind of modern kind of AI first product development lifecycle, which means you need a workflow engine for these agents to participate in that have access to your product resource documents and your design files and your code base. So we've had to do a lot of work to kind of design a modern agentic kind of coding system for the company. Then we have to make sure that all of our kind of the more knowledge worker tasks in product management or go-to-market or sales or solution engineering, how do we make sure that all of our Box employees have access to agents that help them work as effectively as possible? So agents that can access all of the kind of corporate data in our enterprise, agents that can help you automate account research for customers you're going after, agents that help us accelerate our product campaigns or our marketing campaigns. So that's a lot of the rest of the work. And I think mostly what we're doing is we want to encourage everybody to use AI as much as possible, as long as it's kind of practical in the use case. We want to make sure that we keep people in the loop with everything. So one thing that we've been very clear on is that you still are accountable for the work that the agent is producing. Mm-hmm. You can't kind of relieve that accountability and say, oh no, the agent did it. We're also very, I think, biased toward the sort of human plus agent collaboration modality, as opposed to just move to everything being agents and kind of get rid of the people. We want to make sure that we find a way to augment the work that people are doing, as opposed to kind of really think about replacing that work with agents. So we really think about it as a force multiplier of the people side. So, we haven't looked at like how do we cut jobs with agents. We kind of do the opposite. We sort of say, how do we get more output per person, and how do we just make sure that we're getting more done as a company as a result of adopting agents?
How do you this is much more, as I also see it, as a compute revolution instead of like doing communication and a little bit of efficiency. What you're describing is how do I leverage the intelligence of a person through an agent on top. And this is much more difficult in my experience for people to adapt to, because it's so different regarding the job. So let's take an example. On the way here, of course, I prepared with Codex. This is my usually go-to spot because I like to code, but I also like to do knowledge work. And I find it a very, very reliable agent. And there are certain things I can delegate to it and know like that'll happen. And then there are certain things I have like feedback when I really want to relieve it to Codex and say, okay, you double checked it. Most of the time, the problem is finding the right source in the vast tool set that we also have, that many other companies have. And I know that you were always saying you're the security and governance layer. How does it practically work? Because what tools and on what level the rules can clean up the mess that many companies have out there, all the Excel files, all these dead artifacts, like they are so important in order to get a good outcome. And this is to me one of the key question marks that they usually have.
Yeah, I mean, this is this is sort of one of the big problems for an enterprise is a large amount of their data, as an example, is fragmented across 10, 20, 30 different systems inside their enterprise. Agents don't easily have access to that data. The protocols don't work well. The systems are on-prem, so they don't really kind of connect to MCP server. I mean, they can't really kind of show up as an MCP server very easily. They're not built for agents to go and kind of navigate very effectively. So our data is fragmented. We also don't really have these kind of core sources of truth for data in most enterprises. Like, where is the contract for that one customer stored? It might be in 5 different places. And so if it's in 5 different places, that's 5 different chances for the agent to get the wrong one, the wrong version, go off of the wrong, answer to a question. So we need our information to be, we need better sources of truth. We need more authoritative sources of documents. We need to move this data to the cloud effectively. So that's a lot of the work that has to be done if we're going to be able to use agents across our workflows as in knowledge work. That's actually why we're seeing so much demand right now, is more and more companies are realizing they have to go and modernize their systems and be able to move that to the cloud effectively.
Do you have also, the famously forward deployed engineers for like doing this for box customers? So they are with clients and doing the cleanup of the data and stuff like that. How did that job then change?
So we do have our equivalent of FDEs, and what they're basically doing is they're going into an organization. They're saying, okay, let's understand where the data is in this workflow. We go to a bank, and they have a bunch of customer documents for getting loans processed or onboarded in a wealth management kind of relationship. There's a bunch of personal documents, a bunch of loan documents, a bunch of bank statements that they need to go in and get into the cloud. Well, that data might be fragmented everywhere. So we have to first help the customer understand where it is. We have to find a way to kind of map it from the prior sort of architecture and move it to a modern architecture. So we have to kind of get it into the cloud. We have to get it in a data ready, in an agent ready data format. Then we need to actually figure out what models are going to work well on this data. How should we configure agents to work well? We have to do a lot of evals for that customer. We have to help them sort of figure out like what is this workflow actually going to work for you inside your organization? So all of that work has to be done. That is heavy human work. There's no way to automate it. You have to have people go in, understand the workflow, understand the data, build out evals. That just takes a tremendous amount of work, and that's why you're going to have humans go in and get utilized for just all of these processes in the future.
But how do you see it when I have many questions regarding that? Let's start with one that is a new model comes out, in that moment, you need someone and you need the skill set in order to evaluate again the new model against the data, against the system prompts you might run in your system. So who would do that then? Customer side, or do you see that as a service in the future that will be continuously there?
I think that I think vendors will have that kind of talent, and they'll help support that, and then they will certainly kind of vendors will lean in with their version of FDEs. You'll probably have systems integrators that have a role for that as well. So they'll have a bunch of talent that is sort of FDE talent as well, and then individual customers will also probably have some of this homegrown within their IT organization. So the IT organization of the future will often be really kind of these FDEs in the organization, and their job will be to constantly kind of maintain and curate these agents for each of the lines of business to make sure that all of the workflows and the agents keep running effectively across the enterprise. So I think you're going to see a lot of interesting roles emerge inside the enterprise to help deploy and manage and observe and improve the quality of agents inside of organizations.
And what about the a little bit juicy topic of building, let's say, relationships to the providers that have models that are maybe locked off for the public, but are available to a certain amount of people? Is this the new kind of PR relationships that has been built? Or what do we see here? What do you think?
Well,
I know you have a strong opinion on that one.
Well, this is it's a very interesting question, and it's because I think there is a little bit of a debate will there be these kind of trusted access kind of layers to get access to Fable or to get access to GPT 5.6. I think there's an argument that that's one scenario that plays out. Alternatively, there's a lot of value in this idea of kind of being a model router where, sometimes maybe it's frontier model access that you want, and other times it might just be an open source model that you want to make sure that is kind of tuned to your particular workload, and who's going to be in the best position to be able to give you access to an open weights model. It's going to be the abstraction layer between the workflow and the model. It's not going to be one of the model providers. It's going to be that kind of routing layer between the actual business process. And so that's the layer that we provide. That's the layer that Cursor provides, or Factory, or Cognition, or Salesforce, or ServiceNow. So that's going to be a lot of the value that kind of kind of applied AI layer will deliver.
Yeah, no, I get that, and I can see that, and it's still new. It was definitely new to me that a model has been rolled back and hold back. I was like, okay, this is a bit awkward, and I told our clients in the end, the stronger your layers in between are, like the contacts, the prompts, and so on, the more independent you are. But still, it has a little bit of a taste that this happened, and it also dawned to me, okay, there is a new age of models, because there is something to, I always see it as a triangle. You have the model as the engine, you have the context, and you have the prompt. And it all needs to be in balance in order to provide something. But there are certain moments when the model becomes so strong that you sit in front, and you might have had this too in December when everyone thought like, oh wow, Opal was 4.5. Whoa,
right.
This works finally now. And this is different to technology we had in the cloud age. And if there are now companies having a big advantage, do you still see that as startups running behind, you can still catch up? Or would you say this is a moat that is so strong it's hard to catch up? Because these companies are partners on the same side, right? Like they're partners, providers, and mix it up.
Well, sorry, the moat being so strong on which side?
The moat being so strong on the provider side, let's say OpenAI with 5.6 or Anthropic with Mythos, having such a strong, not only responsibility, but also a moat, saying having a stronger model and providing that to certain players, but not everyone.
Well, I actually think that the model providers probably would like to make sure their models are broadly accessible.
Right.
If you were to talk to Sam Altman right now, my guess is he wants to make sure that GPT 5.6 is massively available.
Yeah,
because any time that they constrain access to their model, that's just less that's just less demand that they can, kind of go and have driven. So I would say the models want to be freely available, and but the routing layer is what can actually understand the workflow the best to be able to figure out like what model works best with with the specific business process. And so the reason why the routing layer adds a lot of value is because there's a lot of scenarios where maybe you want Fable 5 for really kind of being a planning agent or an orchestration, agent in a workflow, but then you want GLM 5.2 for doing heavy token processing of a lot of the unstructured data in the workflow. So in this case, Anthropic's still going to generate quite a bit of revenue because Fable will be involved. But by token volume, more of the tokens will flow through an open weights model. And the routing layer will be the reason why you can choose different models for those different tasks. So I think this is going to, this idea that what's going to happen is, as an enterprise, you probably want to have some kind of abstraction between your knowledge, your workflow, your data from the models, so that way you can always swap in the different models, and the routing layer basically will provide you that abstraction.
But still, with this router, let's think that through. And I think you were the one when Uber had the headline out. We cut back on Claude Code because it became too expensive. And I think you mentioned, but don't forget they're levering up on Codex now. So you cannot give up these models, but you need to budget it. You need to make a decision of what value do you get out. And how do you teach people on the one hand to make this decision, to have an idea for the value, and how do you budget it next to the IT budget, for example, saying, okay, we have to see it in the controlling sheet at least and plan it ahead a little bit. This is totally new.
Yeah, no, the ROI of kind of agents is this really fun topic because how do you measure the ROI when it's a brand new technology, it's changing very quickly, it's being deployed in like sometimes a diffuse way throughout an enterprise where you can't measure every single person's kind of use of AI at all times. It's a lot of it is sort of obfuscated and not sort of something that you can kind of just go and deeply understand. So in general, what you have to do, what that leads to, is you probably need to have different org owners have budgets for AI like they have budgets for anything else in the business.
Right.
And at the end of the day, you have to give your head of engineering a budget, or your head of marketing a budget, or your head of sales a budget. And they have to use AI. They have to think about AI as one of the budget line items. And they kind of have to be responsible for how effectively do they want to deploy AI in their organization. There's almost no methodology in the history of management science other than having accountability be driven by the team responsible for the delivery of the thing that you're trying to deliver. So if you want AI to accelerate your sales team, you want your head of sales to be the one that owns how much should they be spending on AI. You don't want a different organization owning that decision because then you kind of remove the accountability from that org owner. So I think the reality is what's going to happen is the IT team is going to own managing the technology. They're going to own kind of bringing in the latest version of it, the best in class version of it. That's their job. And then the sort of management and effective use of the technology will go out into the organization. So the head of engineering has to figure out how are they deciding on the ROI and the productivity that they're getting from AI. That's not the CIO's responsibility, because the CIO also can't be responsible for how effective is your sales team, on the people side. And AI right now is just an augmentation of the people's kind of ability to get work done. So it's going to be this kind of joint responsibility. The tech has to be owned somewhere, but then the accountability of the ROI really has to be coming down to the business owners who ultimately own the outcomes of those job functions.
Do you already see Fortune 500 changing in that direction, or is this something more close to you and anyone in the Valley at the moment?
I think it's early for the Fortune 500. I think the Fortune 500 has generally seen this as an IT technology initially. But now is starting to figure out that no, this is really a technology that augments people. So that requires that kind of joint tied at the hip dynamic. But yeah, I mean, you can't hold. a department responsible for something that it can't see the entire workflow through. And so this is gonna, I mean, interestingly, it's gonna put the IT organization in a more powerful position, because the IT organization is now responsible for the outputs of and the sort of the leverage that the entire company has. Because if the IT department brings in technology that's not good, then obviously, then the whole AI strategy is going to fail. Conversely, if they bring in technology that's amazing, then the company could, run way faster and way more effectively. But still, the budget decisions, the ROI decisions have to come from each individual organization.
Which makes perfect sense. And let's stick with that example and say the IT has a decision saying, okay, we also have to come with something that is secure. And then you come from the departments and they, let's say, started with Claude Code or Claude Cowork or something, but from the IT side, it has been the tool of choice. And now even further, you come with Claude Tech, and it even enters your Slack account. And for normal people at the moment, it's not easy to overlook what is happening. You definitely know what is happening and how strategically important this can be. How do you balance these two sides that are racing up?
No, sorry, go.
Yeah, the security side, and at the same time, people driving these new trends very fast.
I think it's very important that, unfortunately, the answer is to try and find the best, the point on the intersection where you're not trading off either. And so what does that mean? So let's take the extreme ends of the poles. So the most, kind of like a locked down governed system, let's say, would probably, not remain very modern or move very quickly, because you would just implement a system and then not ever update it. And so thus your users would always be unhappy, and because they'd always be getting bad technology, but it would be like theoretically like locked down and governed. Mm-hmm. Conversely, on the other end, you could have a version where users can bring in any tool they want. That means you'll always be using the most modern tool for any given team that adopted something new, but obviously then there's no governance of it. So that doesn't work either. So the only real solution is, like, what is the intersection where you get the most amount of modern, technology that works really well and the best amount of governance? And that does mean you need an IT team that is moving way faster than ever before. It has to change its sort of adoption patterns more than ever before. We've already had to change our internal engineering toolkit probably 3 or 4 times in the past 2 years. Because of the amount of changes happening in the best practices in the space. Mm-hmm. So we had GitHub Copilot, then we had Cursor, then we had Cursor plus Claude Code, then we had Cursor plus Claude Code plus Codex. Now we have cloud agents that also can be deployed. Mm-hmm. That's just a 2-year period. We've had to change or update our practices 3 or 4 times. That is basically the pace that the IT organization has to keep up with in 2026. There's simply no way to not do that. If you want to be able to actually have your users have the modern technology that's available. So I do think that it requires IT teams to be moving a lot faster, to be very forward thinking, to be paying attention to what's going on in the AI space much more intently than ever before. Those are the IT organizations that are going to be able to kind of stay ahead.
And user interface design-wise and product design-wise, going to headless, meaning going back from the typical SaaS, you have a GUI you can click through and the interface. And I'm not talking about only the CLI phase that we've been running through in high speed now, all going back to like GUIs when we work with our agents. But at the same time, agents also use these tools headless. And how do you then make sure that you still are the tool of choice also strategically for a company, because this is a totally new kind of product? Like, do you go then all in on the headless design, which is pretty new for many companies, I guess, or do you have to do both?
You definitely have to do both. So there's a lot of ways where agents need access to some kind of underlying APIs. They're going to have to do a bunch of work on a system and access data and do workflows. But then there's a lot of times where I, as a user, still want to go and see like the general kind of like terrain that is related to that particular task. I want to see, the whole Jira ticket. I want to see all of the documents related to this one topic. And that's not something that I want to necessarily chat back and forth. I want to be able to just see like the underlying data. Just as I still go to lots of websites. I use ChatGPT a ton, I use Gemini a ton, I use Claude a ton, but I have more browser tabs open right now than at any point in my history, because what happens is I go and click around and I go and see stuff after the agent has sort of answered something. And that's no different from effectively using GUIs of software products. So you're going to have agents want to use data in a very headless way. You're going to want to be able to pop out into well-designed systems as well to look at that information or to be able to kind of execute a task in a workflow. And I think those things will just work hand in hand together. I think they actually have a very symbiotic relationship. Just as there's a lot of times where I'll go and work on my mobile device and I'll load up something on my phone and then, 2 minutes later hop on a computer to complete that task with the same application. Like sometimes I'll start writing a Slack message on my phone and be like, it's going to be long enough. I'm going to go and hop on a keyboard. Or I'm looking at a document on my device, but then I have to go into a meeting. And so then I want to take the document with me on my phone. So I think we know how to have these kind of fluid relationships with technology, and agents plus deterministic GUI-based systems, they will be very symbiotic in how they interact with one another.
What is your go-to agent harness or organization tool? Like where are you shooting off agents, or are you pretty good in deciding this is good for agents, I do this directly? How do you do that?
Yeah, I mean, my workflows don't always approximate, all of the work that's being done. But for me personally, like most of my time is either like reading, a document, a presentation, a strategy. So I haven't been able to really replace that with agents. I can use agents to go find the surrounding set of information that I'm looking for. I do that, quite frequently with agents, and that's often done within Box. Or it's a lot of external research. So I'll use something like Claude or Claude Cowork or Codex or Perplexity to go and do that. And so that's a lot of external research, or I'll connect to the Salesforce MCP server, or I'll have Perplexity Computer go do a bunch of analysis on the internet. So those would be like a lot of the common tasks. And then I'm often prototyping product ideas. I'll use Cursor, I'll use Claude for that. And so playing with agents from a kind of more coding or product development standpoint as well.
What's your take on the current development around, Codex has been a product from inside because the development team was using it. Same with Claude Code, coming from the inside, and now huge hits in the market in a very, very short amount of time. And it seems like no one yet has found the, let's say, iPhone of agents. Like, how do we do it? What is really AI native? Now, Claude came out with Claude Tech, so it's integrated in Slack. So Slack would stay the layer with Claude, but there is a huge discussion, like, what's the entering layer? And I don't know if there is an answer to that yet, but what's your guess and what's your view on that? Because you usually have broader ideas than most of the ones I'm listening to, and I would be curious to hear some of those.
I actually have maybe a more pragmatic view on this one. I think we're about to enter an era of actually all the above, everything you just said. I think we need to not be waiting around for the one agent to rule them all. I think the ChatGPT moment was a very special moment in kind of AI, because it kind of was a unifying sort of paradigm that made sense for all of the kind of broad-based consumer use cases for AI. I think as we get into more knowledge work, I think you're going to see just a full plethora of different patterns. The way you work with an agentic coding system inside of Factory or Devon will be different from how you'll work with an agentic legal system inside of Legora or Harvey, or how you work with an agentic document or knowledge system like you do in Box. All of these things can be stitched together, so you'll connect to it via MCP inside of Codex or inside of Claude Cowork. But I think we more have to imagine a future where there's not one agentic system that rules them all. There's going to be 20, 30, 50 different systems in an enterprise, all for the different data types or different job roles or different use cases that the organization has around AI.
So how do we price that? I mean, this is so challenging also for customers saying like, this is what we're going to buy or not. I tell you, a typical German company says at the moment, oh, we have Microsoft, let's use Copilot, and now we use AI. I'm like, you're not. You're far away from that. It's one step. It's not everything. And they shy away from leaning into that and investing into that, which is then difficult to catch up later.
Yeah.
How to fix that?
Well, I think it's tough. I mean, you do want to have, a few maybe best practices. One, you probably want people that are really, really deep in the technology space in the company. Often these are maybe people coming right out of college. They've been playing with these tools. They have more of a kind of an AI native approach to work and to coding and to research. So that tends to be a pretty good sort of way of getting information from the outside world constantly into your company. Is just always listen to the young people, because they're the ones that are using the modern set of tools, because they didn't grow up with the old ones. They only discovered AI at the same moment that they were having to do these things for the first time anyway. So they were getting the modern technology into their workflows on day one. I think to some extent competition kind of forces this also. If your company is not using the right technology stack, the right AI stack, you'll feel it. Your company will just move more slowly, or you'll be spending more on technology that you need, or you'll be getting kind of slightly worse decisions. So to some extent, the market kind of ends up solving a lot of this for you, because you eventually need better tools to stay competitive, or you end up spending your resources on things that are not differentiating, and the rest of your competition is able to reapply its resources into more competitive areas. There was a time in the early days of the cloud where it just became very obvious. If you kept running your data centers, you would be spending more money than your peers on undifferentiated activities. If you go in and spend time putting a CRM system into a data center, instead of using a SaaS-based CRM system, then all of those dollars and time and energy that go into that work, your customer doesn't care about. You get no benefit from your customer base by you doing that. But that is still resources that you have to go expend on that problem. So conversely, if you use an agentic system that is not giving you the right upside, but your competition is getting that upside, you'll just very quickly, realize that actually you're falling behind in the market. So I do think the market kind of, ends up making a lot of this stuff get solved for you a lot of the time.
And regarding that, since you also mentioned how the cloud works and what worked back then, I mean, you as Box or other companies like Salesforce or even SAP in Germany, you have totally different challenges when you build a product, much broader than most people think, that code on the weekend with Claude Code and say, oh, great, I built my own software.
Yeah.
But what is your take on this additional software layer where it's not regarding millions of people or not even hundreds of people, but maybe one person saying, okay, I built this for myself like I do with an Excel spreadsheet. And with that, you still enter a software product, even if it's one person that needs to have data, that needs to have governance and rolled out and so on. So this famously quote unquote software of one, for one person. Is this something you see really as sustainable, because you can now build things that were just too expensive to build in the past? I mean, the early days of the cloud, it was crazy to me that you then could rent with AWS and you say you build something. Before that, you had to have your own servers. It was just too expensive. Now it gets even cheaper. Or do you think this will be over soon because this will be provided by big companies?
Well, I think I like the idea for certain use cases. I think that for most of your software activities, you're not going to be generating software on demand for yourself, just because most people their needs are not that unique, and nor do they have the kind of appetite or energy to kind of think through, how do I go prompt the system to have it build something? Probably for my entire life, if I had gotten good at Excel, I probably could have done amazing things, but I never got good at it. So I just never ended up doing anything interesting with Excel my entire life. I think that's kind of like how a lot of people will treat N of one software, because they're like, I just don't want to have to learn how to agentically code or run a piece of software. And the upside for that person is just not high enough to make it worth doing that. Conversely, there's actually a lot of people that it is, this incredible new technology. There's going to be a lot of people in IT teams that can go out and now build custom software for their company. And I think there's going to be a lot more custom software than ever before. There's no question. I just don't think that will be the dominant use of software in the future. I think it'll be 30% of software or 20% of software. But what's going to happen is we're going to have more software in general. We're going to have way more applications. We're going to have way more software for all of these, tiny little niches that we could have never had software before, because some entrepreneur will come up with this idea and it'll be far faster for them to go build it, and they'll be able to actually go and deliver in a market that they could not have gone and pursued previously, because it wouldn't have been justifiable building an entire engineering team just to go after this one niche market. So I think we're gonna have more software, we're gonna have more commercial software, and I think as a result of agents making it easier to code, I think we're gonna have more N of one software as well.
How important became, regarding that, the topic of relationship when it comes to clients and internally? Because people always think like the AI will replace, but I know that you're a company, of course, with a huge sales force internally, having relationships with your clients. And how did that change in the past 3 years when you look at that? How important became that?
Well, I think relationship with customers is one of the most important and sustaining moats that exists. So the ability to have an ongoing relationship and learn your customers' environments and update your technology to better support them is critical. And I think that it will be one of the sustaining moats in the future of software.
And regarding that, the topic of, I think Sequoia put it out saying that the next $1 trillion market is a technology company, but wrapped as a service company. So a little bit of both. Is this something you're heading to with the FDE is at Box, or are you still more the tech company in the classical way?
I think we're probably more of the tech company in the classical way. I think they're I think the outline that they are focused on is probably more of the new company's opportunity. Like if you're going to do like an agentic law firm or an agentic insurance company or an agentic financial services company, you kind of have to both compress the human services work and the software work into one company. That is actually a pretty compelling new opportunity for lots and lots of startups. We probably don't make as much sense there because we've always been very horizontal. So what we would probably do is actually help power many of those companies. So you would use Box as a platform for delivering an agentic law firm or an agentic insurance company. And so we would be more in that ecosystem as an enabler as opposed to delivering one of those types of value propositions.
Let's, for something that goes through my mind, and I have your timing in my mind as well. I know that you are tight on schedule, but this is something that really interests me. Let's say you go back 20 years and restart, but you restart as an AI native company. Where would you start and why? Like, how would you rebuild something like Box or something today if you would not have to restructure or rebuild it, but say you start ground up as an AI native company? What would you do?
Well, one of the things that we're benefiting from is that most of what you do with agents, you need documents and you need enterprise content for these agents to be effective. So actually, there's a lot of things that I wouldn't necessarily reset. I would actually kind of take forward into the future. There's just more ways about running the company that we're constantly learning. So again, like we are constantly kind of raising our expectations and our goals around projects because we know that we can use AI to better deliver technology far faster. So what we're having to do is not accept the same goals or planning cycle that we did a year ago or 2 years ago. We have to like constantly ratchet up our goals and our expectations. We have to make sure that, again, we have the right documentation for agents. So when a new employee onboards in the company and they ask a question, there's an agent that can instantly answer that question for them. So we can get employees to be much more productive far faster. We obviously want to constantly make sure that that all of our employees have access to the leading tool set to be able to help them work effectively with agents. So those are a couple of the areas that we're constantly thinking about how do we run in a more and more modern way.
So in a 20-year time frame, I mean, you're one of the longest serving CEOs in the Valley when it comes to that. And you've seen a lot of things. Where would you say in these 20 past years, what kept you that driven and that motivated that you keep on going like this today?
I think it's mostly just how exciting the technology is. This is one of the fastest moving markets of all time. There's constantly, change that's happening. We get to, play with new AI models as they come out. We see these breakthroughs happen constantly. So I think it's really about the sheer just velocity of the space and then being able to bring that innovation to customers. That's what keeps me excited. So we're having the best time that I think we've ever had in building the company.
Definitely. Also number-wise, what I see, and as I said, I follow you for a while. And one final thought: what is something of an area just comes to my mind that we didn't touch, but we definitely should have a look at when we regard this as the new industrial revolution that is happening? What did we didn't touch, and why do you think it would be important? Anything you can think of?
I think mostly maybe the only thing is I have a pretty optimistic view on the future of jobs, just because I think people are going to use, the companies are going to use AI to really be able to get more output and get more done in their company. They might use it to save money initially, but what's going to happen is some other company will emerge, and that company will use AI to do more. And the company that does more and better serves their customers will be the ones that get more customers. So you have a very virtuous flywheel that will basically cause the companies that can drive more output. That might be in the form of software development. That might be in the form of selling to customers. That might be in the form of better marketing campaigns. And all of that work still takes people. So I think you're just going to see this dynamic where the companies that use AI to do and better serve their customers, to do more and better serve their customers, will be the ones that keep hiring. And that will actually make the case for why you're actually gonna have more jobs, or at least as many jobs in the future for people as we do now. And AI doesn't actually end up kind of automating all these jobs out of existence.
So more like a compute revolution that really leverages through. Also, you can shoot off more agents, you can use more intelligence instead of just being more efficient. What many people claimed at the beginning.
Yeah, exactly.
Got it. Aaron, thank you so much, and appreciate your time. I always want to make sure that we keep in that time frame. So thank you for that session, and I hope that wasn't the last one, because we need more of these insight also here in Germany, and I always try to connect that, and you're one of the very open-minded leaders that is long-serving. So thank you so much for these thoughts and ideas.
Awesome. Thanks, Christoph. Appreciate it.